I'm so glad that we're all here together for this evening's lecture. My name is Charmaine Williams. I'm the Dean of the Factor-Inwentash Faculty of Social Work. And I'm so pleased to see you all here, and I'll gesture to the people online to also see the people online, and really excited about tonight's lecture, which is actually the first in a series that I wanted to cultivate called the Social Work in Global Context series, because we're in times when you really are aware that that boundaries and borders are very permeable, and that we all have an effect on each other, and that the social work that we are doing is local, but it is also global. And I think tonight's speaker is going to be a wonderful epitome of that. Before we get started, I'd like to start by acknowledging the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and learn on this land. I always like to take a moment to reflect on the land acknowledgement and what it means for the particular event, or for us more generally. Certainly in my thinking about it now, we've been doing land acknowledgements for a while, and they start to feel like it's just something we say at the beginning of a talk. For me, I do actually appreciate the moment to center ourselves in the moment and on the land that we're on. I also remind myself that the land acknowledgement is not just about the fact that people were here a long time ago. It's also about the people that are here now, and the fact that we are on Treaty 13 territory, and we are treaty people, and we have ongoing work in terms of our work in reconciliation with the Indigenous people of Turtle Island. So with that in mind, I'm so glad that we are going to be having a talk today that talks about peace building, because that's certainly part of the work. So we're very fortunate to be able to host tonight's speaker. A bit of a story about how we connected with her. I mean, I won't go into the whole story, but I'll just say it's nice when your neighbors drop in and say hello, and a neighbor dropped in and said to say hello, and the rest is now we're here for a lecture with this incredibly impressive speaker. So this is my opportunity to welcome Dr. Amal Elsana Alh'jooj to UT to share her work and her experiences with us. Dr. Elsana Alh'jooj, I'm sure
very well.
is the founder and executive director of PLEDJ, which stands for Promoting Leadership for Empowerment, Development, and Justice, an organization that works to empower marginalized communities to address intractable social problems at local, national, and international levels. Amal brings with her over 30 years of experience working at the intersection of community organizing and peace building in the Middle East and Canada, focusing on marginalized minorities. Amal earned her BA in social work at Ben Gurion University in Israel and received her MA in community organizing and PhD in social work at McGill University. So of course, very excited to have a social worker watching this year. Between 2016 and 2020, Amal was the executive director of the International Community Action Network at McGill University. She is also the co-founder of the Arab Jewish Center for Equality, Empowerment, and Cooperation. She is the recipient of numerous prizes, awards, and distinctions. And if you Google her, you will see she really is quite lauded. Amal is the author of Hope is a Woman's Name, a personal memoir that recounts her experiences growing up as an Indigenous Bedouin Palestinian woman in Israel. While addressing the challenges of patriarchal tribal traditions and prejudices of the Israeli state, the book explores how Amal has woven together every aspect of her intersectional identity, Bedouin, Arab, woman, Palestinian, and Israeli citizen, to navigate between individual, social, and political identities and the systems of power within which they exist. As you know, there is an opportunity to purchase the book today, but we've got an even better opportunity because Amal is going to speak with us tonight. So please join me in welcoming Amal as our speaker.
Thank you, Charmaine. Thank you very much for this introduction. Thank you, Dale, for taking the time to really put this together. And thank you all for coming and joining. It's an amazing opportunity for me to see old friends and to see also new faces. and students, absolutely. For me, to be here at the School of Social Work, it's a great pleasure because I'm so proud of being social worker. This is the identity that really captured exactly what I'm doing in my life. And I will tell you exactly how my lived experience shaped my social work profession, work ethics, vision, and everything I do. So everyone who's not in social work, right after my lecture, you go apply, okay? So I usually start with my personal because I believe the personal is the political and the political is the personal. And there is no way that we talk about our ethics and our work without going back to our lived experience that absolutely shape who we are. So I was born, and you would read most of that in my book, I was born as a fifth girl in a patriarchal system where my parents really didn't want to have me. For them, I was a tragedy, for my mother especially, because being there means that my father will marry with a second wife. And for my father, he became Abul Banat, the father of the girls, means he wouldn't have any status in the tribal structure. If you have boys, then you have power. And if you have power, then they count on you. So my father felt he has no power because of the girls. Today, he changed his mind, right? So for me, it was a place where I was born, a place that I am not wanted, and I needed to prove myself, which is a very, very heavy task on a very young child shoulders. Because how do you prove yourself? How do you show everyone that you are capable of doing things? And the fact that you are a girl, it doesn't mean anything. So I remember the first fights in my life were around small things. When my family get together in the tent, my mother would give my younger brothers that nice piece of a chicken, and the girls would get the wing, or maybe they wouldn't get anything. My sisters, this was okay. For me, this was a fight. So I used to jump on my brother, take his piece of chicken, and run away in the mountains of Lagia. And for my mother, I was a troublemaker. Looking back at this experience, and when my sisters used to say, Amal, you are fighting over food. You are so cheap. You are fighting over food. But for me, I said, that's not fighting over food. That's fighting over my right to exist as an equal person in the tribe. So this is how my fight starts. And my name goes back to the fact that when I was born, my father came to see my mother at the hospital, and my mother was crying and crying just to show my father that she's not happy with the fact that it's a girl. And my father looked at her and he said, stop crying. Promise me to give her the name Amal. Hopes God give us boys after her. 5 boys were born after me. So even my name doesn't belong to me. It was a name that I was giving so that my parents would feel okay with themselves. So I started in a very, very early age, looking at my community in a critical way, looking at the women's status and the elderly, and the fact that I live in a village that at that time wasn't recognized by the state of Israel, where we didn't have electricity, we didn't have water, and just 17 kilometers away from my village, you see the Jewish city with electricity, with water, with everything, and you would ask yourself, why is that? Why I am excluded? Why I am living in such conditions in the heat? You barely, handle and be in a metal shack, and in the winter it's so cold. And I remember myself asking all these questions. But what really helped me ask the questions wasn't the fact that I was just sitting around the fireplace with my mama and with my abui. It was the fact that my mother was so tired of my questions that she said to my dad, Maudia, I don't want to see her anymore. Do something with her. She's a troublemaker. And that's when my grandfather really provided me with the best opportunity ever that shaped my entire life, which is, can you guess who read the book? Yeah, being a shepherd. So for me, this was an opportunity to be away from my mother's kitchen, from all these kind of discourse around you. You're a girl, you're supposed to be here. You can't ask questions, you can't do that. All the no, 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 no. So I was there out in the field with my sheep and with my goats. I like goats more than sheep because you know what the difference between the two? No. So sheep are very quiet and they would follow. Goats are troublemakers, just like me. So if you want to see the scene, when you go to Morocco and you want to see the arrogant trees, see who's jumping though in the arrogant trees. These are the goats and reminds me of my goats. So for me to learn community organizing was the fact that I was a shepherd. So if you want to take the skills and learn the skills of leadership and community organizer, exactly the same skills you need to lead people. I'm not saying that people are sheep or goats, but guys, we are followers. Look how much we are following the media and acting the way others are expecting us. So in some ways, we all go the same track unless someone is, going to the other direction and we say, oh, he's not right. We all right, but that person is not right. So I was someone who really went out of track with my parents. And for that, I paid a lot of prices, but I'm not gonna spend the whole evening talking about my life story because you will read it in my book. But I am telling you this because being a social worker, what really shaped my profession, my understanding of the essence and the values of our profession as social workers is my lived experience as an indigenous, as a Bedouin, as a Palestinian, as an Israeli, as a woman, as a mother. All these identities coexist in a way that for me, it's not one on the expense of the other. It's all components of my identity that absolutely enriched my own experience and my own life. So from the first projects in community organizing at the age of 14, when my dad said, no way, girls are not supposed to study away from their family. You are not going to Haifa, which is a school that my father decided to send my brothers, but not the girl, Khas v'Khalila, God forbid. And I thought, oh, I am a very good student. I was a shepherd. So I go 5:30 in the morning with my sheep, come back 7:45, run to the school, come back from school at 1:30, go back to the mountains, do my homework in the mountains, come back. So I was a very good student. I was reading a lot of books at that time. And I was thinking that because I show my dad that I'm a good student, he will send me with my brothers. So he didn't. And that's what created my first project. So I started teaching women reading and writing in my mother tent. So my first classes of women to read Arabic and to write Arabic and understand Hebrew so they can manage when they go to the hospital was in my small tent when I started teaching them. That project turned, I was 14 years old, that project turned from a one small tent into a program that's supported by the Israeli government. It was a service program, and here we are talking about the policy change program. So for me, at that time, I didn't study, Chairman, I didn't study social work at that time, but it was clear that I can't just provide the service and that's it. The absence of service tells you that there is something wrong in the system. The fact that women doesn't have, and they don't have the right to learn tells you that there is something wrong in the system and why. So the question of why was, there is a policy. And that's exactly how I connected policy change with service provision. It's something that I will elaborate on it later. And the second thing is how we connect local issues with global policies. And this happened for the first time when I was leading a program for women from one of the unrecognized villages. When I say unrecognized villages in Israel, these are Bedouin villages that you won't see in the map. There is no address, there is no electricity, there is no water. So I was working with the women to really provide services and try to do some policy change. And 2008, remember the financial crisis made of, right? And we didn't get the budget, the money we needed, and we needed to close one of the projects. And the woman was so angry at her husband because he was fired. And her husband came to me and he said, I'm telling her everything about the fact that there is no budget and we didn't get the donation we were planning, and she doesn't understand. And that moment I was, yeah, so this is happening in New York. And that Ahmed, in her own small village, is directly affected by what's happening globally. So how do we teach people to connect their local issues with global policies, with global issues? The fact that Ahmed doesn't have water in her own village is connected with decisions taken in Jerusalem, in the parliament, in the Knesset. And for her, it's not that. For her, it's because my husband didn't do his job, because our neighbor took that money. So the whole idea of the system is how to make us marginalized people fight over limited resources. So instead of we come together and say, it's the system and we need to do something to change the policy, we fight among each other. We fight among each other over very limited resources. And this is what brought me to teach in my community in 2000, when I was having this big demonstration. It was planned to be a big demonstration next to the parliament. So I did outreach. I was with the people. I explained exactly what we do. We need to change the policy. This is advocacy. This is advocacy. This is advocacy. And I thought I was able to explain what advocacy is. And that day, only 26 people showed. And I looked at myself and I looked at the people, and I was planning for this for the whole month. And I said to myself, what is it that I am not getting here? As a social worker, as a community organizer, what is it that I am doing wrong that people all agreed with me? When I sat with them around the fireplace, when I sat with them in the tent, when we spoke about this, they said, yes, yes, we will come. And then all of a sudden, it's only 26 people. And that moment I said two things. One, what if the Minister of Education, it was a campaign for equal education for the Bedouin kids. So what if the Minister of Education will come out and say, hey, what do you want? You are shouting and screaming since the morning. What is it that you want? That's one question, right? Are we ready? Do we know what we want? Do people who live in such a system of oppression, who never had the opportunity to be asked, what is your dream? And what is it that you want to do? We always were asked, what are the problems? So we are experts. We know how to tell you what's the problem. But when it comes to the solutions, the system usually teaches us that, leave it to us. We know what's the solution. So social workers, we go, we think about the solution, we come and we provide. And then we are like, what? How come people are not joining? Because they don't own the solution. It's our solutions. It's not solution, their solution. So that moment I said, this is where I am going to think together with the people differently. How do we empower the people to not only articulate the problem and understand the linkage between their local issues and global policies, but also to understand their role in this process and how they would think about what is the best solution of their problem. I might think about the solution, but it's my solution. It's the thing that reflects me. What is the solution that people want? And that was 2000, and I started the whole program empowering and talking about these issues and helping people understand what is it that we want. So this is one. The second thing was like, okay, great. So you are doing advocacy, demonstrations, and then the third demonstration, Ali would come to you and say, we are tired. Last week, you took us to a demonstration, nothing happened. 1 month before, you brought us to another demonstration, nothing happened. So classical advocacy, is it the answer when we talk about marginalized communities? When we talk about power relations where the balance is so not even that people would be able to change the system. So what do you do in this case? How do you do advocacy in a way that you will absolutely change policy? And this is how the whole concept of advocacy-based action was created. So what we should do and what we did is exactly this. We work with people, we create the solution, and then we come to the government and we say, here's the solution. So first, you are not coming with empty hands. You went through the whole process of understanding why do we need this service. So we call this the multi-dimensional service. So in the profession of social work, we sometimes focus on service and we deliver services, which is part of what we do, right? But in this case, sometimes service will create this dependency among people. So people would be dependent on the system. Some systems would love that, right? They don't want to see us running in the streets and doing demonstrations. So some systems would appreciate that people are taking the service and not saying anything. So one is that we don't want this kind of service provision to disempower people. So how do we do this process and yes, provide the tangible service? Because in the end of the day, Ahmed needs water. I can't sell her words, right? She needs water, she needs bread on the table. So how do you do a program that in the end of the day, that this program would provide the service, but in the way it will empower the community and link the fact that the absence of this service is not because you are Ali or because you live in this village. It's because of something bigger. It's because there is a system, there is you, there is this, there is identity issue, there is, minority, majority issues. So you raise awareness around political issues, social issues, and you link this service to the multiple reasons and factors that impact this reality. So in this case, people understand. So having the service, they are passive, they are receiving the service. But once they understand why they don't have the service, they became active participants. And then it's much easier to join an advocacy program, right? Because they are aware, they are not here. They are already knowing why they are not getting the service. And this is two. So one, it's empowering people. Second, it exactly meets the tangible needs. And third, it's really activating people to become part of the solution and not anymore part of the problem. And they would determine together what is it that they want to ask the government to do for them. So that's one of the projects. One of the approaches, and I will give one example. So early childhood and centers for kids from the age of 3 to 5 is something that Bedouin community doesn't have in the unrecognized villages. So we decided that what we want to do is really create this service together with the people. So first, we invited the women in one of the tents. We start talking about this. Do you think you need this? What does it mean to have a early childhood center here? Oh, means that I can go work. I can go visit my friend. I can go this and then, okay, so who's gonna teach our kids? And that was the idea of how we turn the educational system in a way that we respect the knowledge of our parents and how they raised us. So in the Bedouin community, it's an indigenous community, but yet it's a Western concept, schools. So teaching was something that took place outside in the mountains, free activities. All of a sudden, we jailed the kids and in between 4 walls, and we want them to think creatively. What is that? How this happened in our days, right? So we decided yes, I want to teach them PLEDJ and the child development and all these theories, attachment theory and all these theories that are very, very important. But at the same time, this alienation, I want the kids to grow connected to their parents. that fence between the school and the community is so visible that you cannot even imagine. And the teachers were telling me, oh, parents are not coming to the meetings, but how do you want the parents to come to the meeting if they are coming in feeling they know nothing because they don't know how to read and to write? And in my Bedouin culture, you don't visit anyone without taking something with you. So if she's not having anything there, she wouldn't come. So how do we think about, these issues of, parents' participation in the school? So what we did, we invited all the grandmothers and we discussed, how did you raise your child? What are the stories? How did you learn colors? How did you learn shapes? How did you learn all this? So they were sharing. For me, I learned colors because I was doing embroidery with my mother. So all these colors, right? I learned how to count because, oh my gosh, I went out with 50 sheep. I need to count them every single day to make sure I am not losing any one of them. So there is like a natural way of learning that we are losing. So what we did a curriculum of, for early childhood education that based on the Western models and also in the indigenous local knowledge of the community. And by that, we were able to invite the women, the mothers, to be the best educators of their children. And this program, at first, the government said to me, this is unrecognized villages. Policies, according to the policy, we can't do anything in the unrecognized villages. So sometimes we social workers, we submit to the policies, right? We say, okay, so this is the policy. But for other social workers, we have to challenge and critically think about these policies. And at that moment, I said, so how do you do something, not putting yourself in troubles with the government, because you are responsible for these people. You don't want to put them at risk, right? At the same time, how do you change that policy? So I said, so what is it that you don't want to do in the unrecognized villages? They said, we can't put any building. This is against the law. Putting a building there, it's because we don't recognize these villages as villages. If you want, you move to one of the townships that the government put. So I said, okay. I asked the group of women, we were 15, and I said, what about if you donate your living room during the day for this project? So they said, yeah, of course, why not? So we opened the preschool frameworks in the people's houses, and I went to the government and I said, the only thing I want you to do, and this is really something the governments like to do, they want to take over an ownership over something that they don't do. So I said, I just want to make sure that professionally we're doing good. Yeah, of course, we're coming. So they came and they visited the frameworks. Not only that, they put their sign on that building that it's illegal, because all buildings in the unrecognized villages are illegal according to the government, but they don't destroy all of them because otherwise where people would go. So they put the sign under the supervision of the Ministry of Education. So that place has no water, no electricity, nothing, but the supervision of the government. And at that moment, they are part of this. And we started inviting them, and then the woman who's in charge of this program in the government applied for a conference in Brazil about early childhood and multiculturalism. She called me and she said, Amal, I want your program. I want to present it in Brazil in a conference. I said, of course, it's your program. You visit us every week, but it's your program until you fund it. She said, what? I said, until you fund it, it's your program. And this is how we get the funding. The long story, it was long, like really a long story, but we got this program funded from 7 preschools that we operated in the houses of people. Today, there are 92 frameworks in the unrecognized villages, including budget coming from the government. So it's not classical advocacy. You go and you fight. You build the alternative and you show the government. And once it's there, you lobby for it. And this is how you get it. So this is what I call advocacy-based alternative, where the multi-dimensional service is big part of this model in our work. The second thing brings me to peace building. So many times, we social workers are the one who deal with the outcomes of war. So we deal with poverty, with structural violence, with human rights violation, with all these issues. But we are not there to determine the peace process. And we only there to make sure that we are helping people. And why it's not part of our work? Why our work is so localized in a way that it focuses in services, but even when you break down, when you unpack the whole issue of war and peace, it's our work. But we tend not to do that because it's kind of political role of social workers when we deal with peace building. But it's exactly our own work, because peace is not only a word that people, it's absolutely, we know how often we say peace. But when we talk about peace with marginalized communities or people who live in war, they would look at you like if you are crazy. Peace? Like, who would fight for peace? For them, it's a luxury thing. It's something that they don't see any relationship with peace and their daily life. Like, they don't see peace as absence of, they see it absence of war, but they don't see it as an opportunity for development, as an opportunity for putting food on the table. So every time I talk with the Palestinians in our program about peace, they say, oh, these are the Israelis who want peace. I said, and you don't want peace? What do you want? What do you want? So do you understand peace? So peace means that you don't stop in the checkpoint. Peace means that you have food on the table. Peace means that you have no structural violence. Peace means, so when you unpack peace, all of a sudden people start to understand that peace is tangible. Peace is their right, that they need to fight for it. And that's when we started talking about rights-based practice. Most of the marginalized communities view their rights as a favor or as a need. And when you look at your situation and you see that everything you need is a need, is something that you need, you are not empowered. But when you say it's a right, you are acting, you are doing something. So people in marginalized communities, from my own experience, would view rights as needs and not as rights. And this is, again, one of the ways we taught people about their rights, and we call rights services. But when we call it rights, then it's a different way of thinking. So I have a role, I'm empowered, I have to do something. That's one. The second thing is like, how do we mobilize people in these situations, in these realities, to move from victimization to a place of being proud? And this is something that along the years when I was doing these workshops, I noticed that most of our people, when I say our people, I count myself as part of the marginalized, okay? So most of our people would act from either a defeated mindset or a victimization place. And this is something that, you know what's the difference between the defeated and the victim, the victimized? You want to think about it? So I drink water. So the victims usually are people who would blame the system. They did this to me, they did this to me, they will blame. They always, it's like fingers out, okay? The defeated is like, usually until my mother was, strong enough to stand up, was like, it's all from Allah, it's from God, that's my faith. We can't do anything to change it. So how do you mobilize people from that place of blaming the others for their own situation, or they have no hope, to a place where they understand that something is wrong happening and that their reality is not the right situation and there is something that has to be fixed? And this is how we work on the whole issue of empowerment, how we really empower our own communities to regain the control over their lives. And the whole empowerment process has to be linked to their own strength and to their own indigenous knowledge. Because if the empowerment is not part of their own strength, they won't feel empowered by something that they don't know. So this is where we employ and elevate the local knowledge and the indigenous knowledge in people's daily life. For example, one of the projects called Embroidery Project, and you can Google it, Desert Embroidery Project. And when I started as a student of social work, this was one of the programs. Lisa, you know the program, right? You visited the program. So I said, okay, so if my mother generation is not employed. In the past, they used to work, weave the tent, in the agriculture. They were very busy, right? Producing. All of a sudden, when the government moved them from their way of life and forced them to live in this urbanization lifestyle, they all of a sudden lost this status as producers, and all of a sudden they became consumers. And my father, that used to rely on my mom, himself also lost the land, the sources of his income, and he became a simple worker in one of the Jewish factories. So my father used to come back. Now he will be back. My mother that used to be a producer, she's relying on him. So I'm saying my father, I'm talking about generations, not exactly my parents, right? So the husband will oppress the wife will oppress the kids, and we know that circle, right? So how do we do this work in a way that it's empowering? So I thought, okay, so women need jobs. So we will do jewelry, and then we would sell it, and then women would get some money. And that first bazaar we organized in the city of Beersheba. 7 women were in that program. None of them wanted to sell any of these products. And I was like, why? Like, I was so angry. I was only 20. I was so angry. And I went back and I said to my grandmother, see, we didn't sell anything because none of the women wanted to stand and sell any of these products. And then my grandmother said, show me what's inside. And I opened the bag and I showed her one of the bracelets. She looked at the bracelets and she said, this is disgusting. Do you want me to stand and sell this and as a proud person and say, this is ours? I feel I don't want to be connected to this product. And this is exactly, you learn Karl Marx theory, the production and the means of production. So this is exactly what my grandmother was telling me, but I wasn't able to think at that time that this is the whole issue. So I looked at her and I said, so what is it that we have to do? And she said, you have to start from where the women are. You have to start from something that they feel belonging to it, that they feel proud of. And I looked at her and I said, embroidery. And she said, yes. And I said, but they have been doing embroidery. This didn't improve their status. And she said, no, use embroidery as a tool. And I'm telling you, we started 7 women, 165 women are in that project. Not all of them doing embroidery. Some of them are doing management of the product. Some of them are selling online. Others are just like me. We have a visit. Helen, you were in the visit center, right? The visitor center. So in the visitor center, you will have a woman, 60 years old, a Bedouin woman with full Bedouin dress, and she would stand there and she would tell her own story, the way she understands her story. It's not the outsider that tells, okay, let's put a Bedouin tent and you pay 5 shekel and you get the sweet tea. It's not a touristic place, it's their life. So the women get that opportunity. Going back to peace building. So working with Palestinians was something in a way that as long as you see yourself as a victim, you will never be able to mobilize your own community towards peace. But peace is very connected to development. If peace is not providing you with the opportunity for development, there is no stake on peace. And this is why people abandon the whole process when they see it's just talking and there is no development. And through the project at McGill, we started the whole program by establishing the rights-based community practice centers in the most marginalized neighborhoods in Jordan, Palestine, and Israel, where people would come and they would learn about their rights, and then they would together think about the services. So in Israel, because you have a government, so the policy part was so strong, so people know that there is absence of like these services. So they do community advocacy and they go and write a position paper. But in Palestine, you don't talk with the Palestinian Authority. It's you know, there are not any kind of policies that force the government to provide you with education and whatsoever. So there we developed a different model that people will create these services in a way that it's a solidarity. It's something that they put their efforts and they develop these kind of services. So there is a mobile in Nablus, the West Bank, that goes from a village to teach women and youth about their rights, and not only about their rights, because if you know about your rights and that's it, you became khatsouf. You know what's khatsouf? Became someone who's like, I know this is my right. You know, I have kids. This is my right. This is my right. What do you do to be entitled to this? Nothing, but this is my right. So, and we don't want to create the situation where people know how to say, this is my right. But right is nothing if you are not stepping out and doing something to gain that right. It's not something in the air and waiting for you to grab it. You have to do something about it. So how to activate rights? What does it mean linking rights to responsibility in development? And then from there, when we have development, when we have all these projects in the ground, when people have food on the table, that's the time you say, that's peace. And when we talk about peace, usually we talk about peace between governments, but that's not the case. You know how deep the fight is among marginalized communities. What kind of conflicts there? In the beginning of the Syrian crisis, we were working with our center, Waqa, in Jordan and Amman, and one of the most marginalized camps there. And the Jordanian government, getting money from the UN, they were providing Syrian refugees with food coupons. And I was there, and when you look, so these Syrian kids would get the food coupons, they were lining up, and the Jordanian kids who live in the same poverty situation were looking at them like this. We also want. So how do you create, in the name of international organization and relief, how do you create this situation where 100% that Jordanian kids will hate that Syrian kid within a week? So this situation of providing this community and not providing, I know that there is limited resources, but what if the UN said, this is the amount of money we have, and we want to think together with the community about this? Where are the people in this process? Where are the people who really think in a way that this is their life, this is their future? And if they are not part of the process, it's gone. So how do you build a program that people will do things together? So this is a program we also did called Muntada al-Khair with the community, that women together came and they start to cook together with a half of the money that they were receiving from the UN. So with a half of the money, they were able to feed all these kids instead of this food coupon that create this dependency on people, on funds. And second, this conflict that started. So peace is not only a political concept, it's a social concept. We need to build peace with and among people themselves. We have to work in a way that how people resolve conflicts, what language used to talk about our common interest, how to create this situation when people, instead of saying you and me, how to build the us. And to build the us, it doesn't mean that we have to agree in 100 things, 100% things. Like it's a case when you say, and this was another thing we did among Palestinian and Israelis. Okay, so we don't agree on many things. We don't agree on the political solution. We don't agree on this. We don't agree on that. But what is it that social workers, as professionals, what is it that we agree on? So we build this common ground, and based on that common ground that we are standing on, we plan the projects together. And then things that we don't agree on, they're out of the discussion. But believe me, the more people are working together in this common ground, it expanded slowly by slowly, because people working together, they are building trust. And one notion in peace building is the whole idea of trust. And when we talk about peace, usually we talk about, a treaty that's signed. What about the feelings? What about the woman that lost her son in the war? What about, and then she would see them signing, oh, peace. No one came to her and said, there's something we want to do together with you to heal. So any process that talks about peace, if it's not bringing the whole process of healing and talking about what is it that we faced during the war and post-war, and this is our work, social workers. And that's when I say, how come we social workers are not engaged in this process? Healing the issues, building trust, building, doing the change. It's all the work we are doing, but in a way, we never put it under peace building. So peace building is something that we look at inner peace, which is the more social support. It's a more like personal and inner peace. And the social peace, how do you build within communities? And then we talk about political peace. And this is exactly what we do in PLEDJ with marginalized minorities. So I will stop here. If you have any questions, I am here to answer. Thank you very much.
Well, I feel like you want to keep walking, but we can also sit down.
Okay.
I believe what we're going to be doing, once I figure out how to turn on the microphone, is that we will take questions from people that are here. And then we also have some questions on, you're saying turn it on now, yeah? Oh, I just wanted to know if you wanted help. Maybe. There, that works, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, there.
so, so we're also going to be able to take questions from online, but I am going to seize the
opportunity.
to have the first one. How did they make our chairs so different?
I think it's something here in the chair.
I'll adjust.
Yeah.
I'll stand tall. Okay, so first of all, I just want to say how much I enjoyed the talk and how much you really sort of honed in on the fact that social work has important roles to play in this. But I mean, I feel like there's so many things I could touch on, but I'm going to start with this one, which is part of what I really appreciated is that you're talking about advocacy and peace building as a type of practice.
Right.
That there are models for it, that there are strategies for it, that there are like systematic ways in which we can think about it and actually, implement advocacy, implement peace building, because I think often when we're talking about it, it's just like, we think that it's just, you say, doing a demonstration or saying what our needs are. But I do think that part of the barrier is that sometimes people, it just seems so big. Like you talked about what's happening to you is because of something that's happening over in New York or what's happening in Jerusalem or, so how do you get past what I imagine can sometimes be people's feeling overwhelmed by the idea that they're somehow going to tackle this big system that's affecting their lives? I think I have to pass this.
This doesn't work.
Oh, no, maybe.
Actually, I think it's off.
So now I take this. Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. So I agree with you. I think social work grow out of really looking at the local level, and everything was developed in that way. And only after, I think 2000, we started looking at the big picture and how global issues are affecting our profession and how we think globally and act locally, this motto, but I would add, think globally, act globally, think locally, act locally. And yes, these issues are overwhelming, but the point is not to really put people under that pressure saying it's all because of that. It's all because in the UN, they decided this is what they are doing. It's the way you unpack this experience to show people, so from here to there, this is something that we can do together. From here to there, we can do with the community. From here to there, we can do with institutions. So you put this in a way that people are capable of looking at this something that they can do, then it's not the overwhelming issue. But in a way, it's really important that people understand that, you know, globalization is something that today is some, you know, we can't think of any local issues without looking at what's happening in the world. We can think about, you know, why the rice is so expensive in Egypt without understanding the relationship to the Ukraine and Russian, the war, right? So, but when we talk about this, it's not that you have to do something about that war. It's about, you know, we know that for the next 4 or 5 months until the war ends, we have to find a way how to get the rice cheaper, how to create a food bank that would serve us until this moment. So this is how we create solution, being creative, how to understand the global issue, but still we act locally in a way that we are capable of finding the solution and not overwhelming people by saying, you know, you create the solution when they don't have the tools and the power to do it.
Okay, well, I see there's already a question coming from the room. Do I need to give him the microphone too?
I think if you speak loud, it will.
I've never been accused of not speaking. Amal, speaking of that, you know, I know you very well. Speaking of that, you know, I know you very well. I know this whole story. But when you're speaking of hunger, I'd like you to recount a little bit of how locally you solved a problem where nationally the Israeli government decided to try and feed the Bedouin kids, and how the project failed until you found a local solution.
Yeah, so this is again the whole idea of multidimensional service. So and the way of rethinking advocacy and how we define advocacy. The research is really very important. After this research showed that one of the reasons that Arab kids and Bedouin kids especially are not doing well at schools because they arrive to the school very hungry. And then we had this campaign and we put a coalition together and we won the Food Security Act in 2005. And then right after that, they selected one of the Bedouin villages to be the pilot program. And it happened that day when I was visiting my mother. So I was leaving the village towards the city of Beersheba. I saw this truck driving towards Hora, and it was written on the truck, catering bush action. So it said catering service. And I was sure it's going to Hora because that's the only way. So I followed that truck. I wanted to see if this truck is providing the food. And I went to the school, and the principal, he knew me and he looked at me because I'm a troublemaker. He said, "What do you want?" He said, "Nothing, I just want to taste the food." So I went in. It was 10 minutes after the kids get the food, and the food was already in the garbage. It's not that taste, it's not their food, it's not the spices that they use. And I looked and I said, there is an opportunity here. We have 82% unemployment among the Bedouin women. And yet we are getting the food catered from outside the village. We can really match the needs with this thing in this opportunity. And I went to the mayor and I said, we have to build a kitchen here. He looked at me and he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "We need to build a kitchen and we will provide the meals." And I was lucky enough because the mayor was so positive and we started the whole program. But telling you, David, it was first, we showed them the vision, this kitchen, but until we get there, we have to renovate it. We have to train you in a vocational cooking, knowing how to cook one pot for 13 kids doesn't mean that you know how to cook for 500 students, right? So we did the whole training, but every day, because I know every time we did a training program and it took time, people drop out and they say, training doesn't mean anything. We got this hours of training, but doesn't mean anything to our lives, doesn't improve our lives. So I used to ask the coordinator, every week you go show them the progress of the renovation. And they felt so empowered in a way that they were looking at the guys who are building, oh, fix this thing, oh, do that. So they were feeling that this is their project. This project provides 15,000 meals a day. The women are the cooperative. It's a social enterprise. All the profits goes back to the community. The decision is made by the women. It's not my idea, it's their idea. It's not my creativity, it's their ability. Without the women, this program would never happen. And that's why community work and community organizing, it's not only about changing people's realities, it's changing people's attitudes towards their realities. Because you might change people's reality by building a community center here and a road here, and if people are not connected, then the second day, if they are angry, they will destroy the road. They will take down the school that you are angry. Oh, we built and see what they are doing. For them, they don't feel belonging to these things. And what I learned also, I was in South Africa and other places, and you see the garbage. And they judge us, oh, so look, your people are like, they are not clean. But when they come into the house, you can lick the honey from the floor. So people are clean. It's that relationship with the public space. So they own their private space, but they don't own the public space. So as social workers, what do you do to expand this ownership? What do you do to expand this 3 meters to 20 meters and to 50 and to 100, and then you create communities? Because we say community, but in fact, when you live in marginality, everyone is absolutely focused on himself. So you see people as community, but when you look at these invisible relationships, it's not community. So it's really something that we need to strengthen, and we really need to rebuild in a way that people can really share that what they're concerned about and also their resources together, which is their strength.
I'll slip another question in case, yeah, I don't know what you're getting from online, but you want? Okay.
And there's more here, yeah.
Oh, in there. Okay, so I mean, one of the things, you've obviously had a very rich international career, and one of the things that concerns me sometimes when we talk about international social work is we're talking about places somewhere else, overall, as if we're not also in this world somewhere. What do you think are the lessons that we could be learning from so-called international social work that apply right here? Like, you know, I think about somebody who rides the subway every day. One of the things that's, you know, very visible to me is the incredible need in our city, the incredible displacement, people unwell, all this sort of thing. I mean, is there something that we could be learning from what's been done in other places that might help us here?
Yeah, so for example, the profession of social work was developed in the West. Most of the theories and the model, everything we use is really based on the Western education of social work. And we are asked to implement these models in our own communities in the global South, which is you develop here and you implement there. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges we face as social workers, because this raises a lot of ethical dilemmas. This raises a lot of, we're really patronizing people. We know better than you. We know exactly how this should be resolved. And when I criticize, I don't criticize from the point of view saying we don't need the Western models. I'm just trying to look at this and say, how do we bridge and this linkage between the Western models that developed among other groups and other minorities that may be similar or not similar to China or to India and other places? How do we reconcile these kind of knowledge and also bring some of the knowledge that was developed in the global South to the people here? Why it's going only one way? Why can't we learn from indigenous communities how they do the healing process? Why don't we learn from people living in the South? How do we do family support? Like for me, when people talk about the structure of family, I was able to go through many crises in my life. If my family weren't there, I'm not sure if I will be able. Like looking at our weddings, it's all based on community support, family support. So the concept of family, if it's positive and if it's serving people in some places, why would we teach them individualism? Why would we install seeds that are, this is not the soil of these seeds? So there's indigenous knowledge that linked to that soil and it grows there. So why can't we empower people by using the local knowledge, the indigenous knowledge? At the same time, why can't we bring this type of knowledge and open our universities and include this knowledge and teaching these models that developed in the South to people living in Canada, to people living in America, in Manhattan? Because at the end of the day, people are people. Dreams are dreams. It's just different means. In the end of the day, the same, what the mother wants in Manhattan and what the mother wants in South Africa, she wants a good life for her kids. What does that mean, good life? This is the difference between what the mother in China would think and what the mother in Israel would think and what the mother in Palestine would think. And this is something that I was in Morocco and New York looked at the women that we visited and they said to her, without electricity, you live without water, you live, are you happy? And she looked at them and she said, yes, I'm happy. And they looked at me, how come she's happy? She has no cell phone, she has no this. So also the concept of happiness, we can determine what's happiness to people, but if people are happy because they are not aware of alternatives, then that's a problem. If people are happy because that's their situation and they grow up in this way and they don't know about alternatives, then this is raise awareness. And if people still want to do the thing their way, then we support them doing their things their way. So for me, it's really something that we need to look at the South to learn, look at indigenous communities, look in a way that our models should be really refreshed with new eyes, looking critically on women issues, for example, looking at youth issues, looking at childhood issues. All these issues need to be really refreshed in a way there is knowledge in other places. There is accumulated knowledge in other places. And what kind of knowledge we will be employing in different contexts. And I do believe that context will determine, but doesn't mean that context is something that would close all other opportunities. We need to open up and understand that things are happening around us.
Great presentation, and I love the social work aspect.
You're gonna apply.
You're right. Well, I am a social worker, so and I also commend that we would have a global session of talks, because the global South, there's a lot there to talk about, and not put it down as you say. There's a lot of values there. But anyway, my question is a little on the side. It's as a social worker in a difficult country politically, and you've been in that too. You could put your life at risk. You see the injustice, you see all this stuff, but you know that there's a totalitarian government who does not want anyone speaking against them. That if you do community organizing, it might be perceived as anti-government activity. And I've been over in Southeast Asia, and they all have their issues, and you have countries that will do anything, like in Myanmar, they'll shoot their people on the street. And in Thailand, you can't say anything against the king or else you're going to be literally jailed. In Cambodia, it's run by a dictator and human rights are controlled. So the social worker comes in and has these sense of things, but there's a risk. How do you have any reflections on the risk the social worker faces in looking at things and how to proceed?
Yeah, very good question. And it's really, reminds all of us that the work for social change is not an easy job. And it's really full of, challenges and risks that we take as social workers. And I think what's important in this process is really understanding the context, because at the end of the day, you don't want to put people, and like you don't want people to put them at risk. And I would say you always smart enough to utilize the cracks. There is no system without cracks. There is nothing that it's absolutely impossible. Like if you work in places like in Israel, in Israel with the unrecognized villages, I utilized the cracks of citizenship. So there were cracks. So I went through these cracks with people saying, there is an opportunity here. We can do something small, but it will grow slowly. So I don't believe in change that it's overnight, because that kind of change is changing only people's physical reality, changing who's leading, change. But the mindset, when you look at Libya, for example, night when the people who led the demonstration killed Gaddafi, and the way they were attacking his body, I said, these people are going to lead Libya in a different way. They're of that same person. So change is something that would free people, and this is what I call the liberating approach, to free people from their mindset of being victimized, of being, defeated. So people act with more values, they act with more solidarity, they act with they usually, when you live in marginality, we tend to use survival tools because it's tough. We need to survive. And we give up on values. So what we need to do is to invite back the values. And slowly, people will adapt values and let go of survival tools. And that's another way of doing empowerment. So I am not someone who would stand up against the system and do this. It's the end of the day, I'm a social worker. I need to provide and to promote the well-being of people and not to put them in danger. So how do you do that? It's really art. It's really the way you understand the context. You go see in this typical village, who are the influential people that you invite, the local resources that people rely on. And these local resources will be your assets in the end of the day. When we started with genetic diseases among the Bedouin community, I was supposed to marry with my cousin, right? That's according to our traditions. And how do you convince my mother that marrying with my cousin will absolutely bring a lot of genetic disease? For my mother, no, that's God. God will decide if you are sick or not. It's not us, right? What we did, I wrote the speech to the imam. I invited the imam of the mosque, told him about all this, genetic disease, took him in a tour, meeting with families that they have 3 kids with the same disease, another family, and how miserable their life. By the end of the 3 months, he said, write me the speech. That's the imam that he would never listen to the woman. And I wrote that speech. It's working with the community, with the rhythm of the community, getting to understand who has the power. These people are living before us. When we came in, they were there, right? We're not the saviors. So how did they solve their problems? We learn from that. So we employ their own tools. If it's within the ethics of our work, we employ their own tools and leverage these tools to become models where they can implement in their communities.
Thank you so much. This was such an invigorating experience, just hearing how powerful your story is. It's such a beautiful thing. So hi,
Hi.
my name is Maria. So my question for you is, you just briefly mentioned about the aspect of survival tools. So in your experience, when it comes to the idea of survival tools, how does that look like in terms of the relationship with peace building within communities?
Very good question. Yeah, so
Mobilizing people to really try to think about what's the core, what's their motivation, what motivates them to do what they are doing, and talking with them about values when they are so angry, when they are deprived. It's not easy, right? It's not easy. When people are angry, they want to act, they want to do whatever. They are so angry. So how do you do a process that help people manage their anger by doing? Because in peace building, usually they do dialogue, they usually talk things, but in a holistic approach, it's not only talking about the conflict, it's not talking about what is it that happened to us and the impact of war, it's also the doing. So you talk about this, but you go out and you do something about it. You fix the road, you do something. And the minute you are part of fixing that road or that kindergarten, or you start thinking about yourself in a different way. You start thinking positively. All these values that were put aside, or your parents even didn't raise you like they raised you in a way that you have to survive. So if you need to lie, do it. If you need to hit, then hit. These are like, you need to survive. So in this way, when people see that their positive way, their positive work, slowly they understand how much deep it is to really connect to your own inner, that the positive side. And I saw it among youth at risk, that they would act violently. But one of the programs that put in place in Trinidad is that the way they taught them to deal with anger was through bringing them to do a stage in kindergarten. So big man with all the tattoos and all this, like he was like with all this anger, trying to calm a baby and put the diaper and how, like, doing all these activities. All of a sudden you see a different person, and not only you see a different person, he sees himself in a different way. So these kind of activities that really, the doing part, it's not only the talking. The talking is important. We have to get things out, but it's not enough. How do you translate these things into something? And the something is that doing together, which is our peace building program. It's the talking about my narrative as Palestinian, your narrative as Israeli. We can't change narratives, but we can weave the future narrative where people can live together. So when you do that, so how do we weave our narrative together? So how do we how, as social workers, how are empowering our communities, whether it's a Jewish community in one of the developing towns or a Palestinian community in West Bank. So by the doing, they kind of create and bring back all these values.
I just want to say how much I appreciate that question, because the issue of survival tools is so layered. So when you were talking about it, I was thinking there's also this piece around, there's a way that we function when we're in conditions of needing to survive, but the brain functions differently, we interact differently. And, in terms of addressing people who have been in circumstances like that, this part of the work is, I think, as you're saying, understanding that this is how you functioned in these conditions where you need to survive. So part of our social work is creating conditions where you don't need to be in a survival. It's not like survival all the time. And then also being in touch with, like, those survival tools are what you needed at the time. But that doesn't necessarily represent who you are as a person or who we are as a people, who our culture is, if we're not in conditions of having to survive. So like the clinician in me is thinking, I know what I would do as a clinician in that situation, but there's also the pieces that we have to do in the community, in our institutions, in the environment, so that people are not in conditions of needing to survive. Because I think so much of what we're seeing in the world is people functioning under conditions of needing to survive.
Absolutely. And we see it with refugees. And I say, yeah, you did this when you were in Syria. You did this when you were in the borders. You did this, but now you are safe. But people need to feel and be convinced that this space is safe and that they don't need to be angry or to attack or to lie, but it takes time, because changing people's mindsets, it takes time, and it's not over. And one thing I done with my students back at McGill was like, they like with a refugee telling her story. And then they said, well, I tried really to empower her. Like, empowerment is not something that it's 2 kilos of empowerment and you open the head and you put it's a process. It's not a recipe. So what I did was like, so you listen to her story. So when I listened with that woman and she started telling this story, I put another there. And every time she was telling me and the student, I crossed the Jordanian borders. So we put all these strong sentences on the chair. And then when she finished her story, and she came like as a very defeated, victimized, and I looked at the other chair and I said, look at that chair. She looked at the chair and said, who's sitting in that chair, if you want to imagine? And she saw all these sentences that she said. She said, that's me. And I said, do you want to move to that chair? And she said, yes. She moved to that chair. It was here. It's here now. That moment, there she was talking about the needs and you need to help me. When she moved here, she said, I know how to make kuppe and pule, and I want to open a small business. So she spoke totally different from that chair that only emphasized her own needs, but not seeing her strength. So it's really very important when we, and I know, like in the social work profession, in like the first wave, we were like told, you do needs assessment, right? So we go and we do needs assessment, and we come back and we think about the project, and we create the project, and we go to the community and we tell them this is the project, and we are very angry because no one participated, because they didn't get what the project is, because it's my project. And then after the civil rights movement and the critical social work, start, to be there and look at things critically, we at the strength-based approach. So we look at people and we understand that people are not only needs, they have aspiration, they have dreams, and they have strength. How we employ this strength to meet these needs. But then again, the third part of this, so it's not only strength and need. So what is it? Why people act the way they act and they behave the way they behave? It's their mindset. So if they see and perceive themselves as victims, then intervention program that Terror toward defeated is not the same program. So when you plan together with people, you need to understand their mindset. Why they act the way they act. You need to understand why they behave the way they behave. It's not, you won't learn this only by understanding what are the needs and the strength. So it's really, and the simple workshop is like, we ask people, how are you? Kif halak? The simple question, and people start answering. Like I give them placards, and Marisa was with me in this. So you give people right to write, how are you? Like genuinely, you answer. And some people would say,
God will help me. Like I have no hope and bad and all. And then we come together and we start analyze, like categorize these and analyze these answers. And this is how you come to what mindset is there. And this is something that you need really to do the needs assessment. You need to do the strength-based approach, but you also need the mindset approach to understand why people behave the way they behave, why people act the way they act. Because I can't tell my mother, and I did this with my mother, I can't tell my mother for ages, don't throw garbage on the street. And I would put a huge container, and then my mother would throw it next to the container. And I would say, why? Why would you throw it? But this is changing her reality. It's putting something in you there next to her house. That doesn't mean anything. But when we talk about environment, that this space and place, this is your home. And when your grandchildren are playing there and it's not clean, they will be hurt. Not kids coming from Honolulu. These are your kids. And you understand that connection, even if I'm not providing her with a container, she will create that container and put it there and start. So these elements, we work with communities in that you own that space. It's yours. So what do you do with that space, with that public space?
I can tell that I just want to have a conversation with you. But we've been talking about the foundation sort of social work, Western social work, and it strikes me that the mindset you're talking about, the victim mindset, is also something that we produce as social workers, right? Because to receive services, you have to perform victimhood in a certain way. To be accepted as a refugee, you have to perform refugee as a certain way, yes? So there's like a fundamental shift that would need to happen in the way that we think about what it is that we do as service providers, to move away from a space of we work with victims, we help people in need, to we are collaborators and people working their strengths, connecting, making use of the cultural resources they have, the individual resources. Like this is like a big shift.
Absolutely.
In the way that we might think about ourselves as social workers.
I can't agree more with this.
Absolutely. And this is working with refugees is so clear that they do everything and all of a sudden the system wants them to act as victims. So they got the asylum seeker. Like they even train them. They train them how to tell their story to the judge. And then we expect them to act differently when they are in different circumstances. So yes, sometimes we social workers contribute to this victimization and maintain this mindset. And this is, I'm saying to students of social work, I know that these days you don't need university to get knowledge because it's all over there, right? So universities these days are we are, this is a big challenge for us, right? Because you can get all the information and the knowledge from outside of the university, but it's not just getting the knowledge and information. It's the experience that will reshape you as students from just consuming knowledge into agents for social change. That's what we are looking at. So how can we really increase your experience of communicating, of building a relationship with your colleagues, doing work, and now with the ChatGPT, like even the papers, we can't look at the papers, but I'm not giving up on having all the students coming in and studying. It's really a life-changing experience without like the idea of, being just consuming knowledge. It's being an agent for social change. What is it that you are doing when you are leaving this campus? What's your role as a social worker? What's your role when you as a social worker, even if you are doing macro social work or micro social work, what is it that you do to promote the well-being of people? What are the values and what are how do you deal with ethical dilemmas, with professional dilemmas? You will need to talk with your colleagues. You will need to speak with with people around you who have the same experience. So I know, because my son is telling me, Mama, we don't need university anymore. Like, no, you need university. You need colleagues. You need to sit together with people, not in a working place, because there you have to serve a system. But the university is your great opportunity to think about knowledge and unpack this knowledge and connect the dots and connect different pieces of knowledge. And this is your opportunity, because it's clear when you go out, we see the difference between people who are in business who did university and people who didn't do university. They are both successful, but really you see the difference of how they think and how logically they are thinking. So don't give up on university.
One thing. When you mentioned about the refugees coming in as victims, I was with Amal in Amman, where we had a center called Waka, where we provided service. And what happened was people would come in as victims. Their husbands left them because they had come in to Jordan and they had 5 kids. They couldn't find a job. These guys felt ashamed, and they left the wife with 5 kids, and they would show up at our center. Please help me, please help me. There, you got a victim. Well, after we provided housing for them and counseled them, guess what? They came to work in the center and now counsel other people. So suddenly you've taken the victim and now they are the solver of the solution and perpetrate it that way.
Yes, a good lesson in that. So I know that we have time for, maybe we don't, okay, maybe we have time for one more question. So I'm gonna hog it. I'm gonna take that last question. So here's the thing. I want to ask you about how to be a healthy advocate. This is something I've been thinking about because I feel like we have not been working in sustainable ways as social workers. This let people sort of wait and see. I guess my burnout's coming in about a year or something like that. And when I work with advocates, I mean, they don't stop. They're planning, they're mobilizing, they're whatever. It's exhausting to be around the advocates. So
Yeah.
how does one stay healthy as an advocate? Because you've obviously been doing this for a long time. How do you do that?
Yeah, so yeah, it's not that easy, but I think for me, being with people and working with people, it's really filling me with energy. Like that's when I do workshops. I love training. I love being there out with the people. So it's really something that fills you with energy. And when we do small projects and we put people on the track of success, this is why I don't believe in big projects, especially when you are at the first stage or the second. Needs an experience of success. And the lack of experience of success really would drain people from hope. So it's really very important that we do small projects and you put people in that track of success. And then that moment of women telling you about her giving like scholarship out of her project to support another girl in Jordan. You hear all these things, but that's not enough. For me, it's also, that's my recipe, okay? Dancing. Dancing is my self-care. So I do a lot of dancing. I dance things out. And I tell the students all the time, you have to find a way. What is it that fill you and refill you with energy? Do it. If nature is, then take the time, walk, and think about the things that you are doing. Because these moments are really, even if we do mistakes, we think about the things and we say, that wasn't the right move. And that's the time when you reflect. Doing and doing and doing, you might do mistakes and you might hurt people even without noticing. Care is very important. And for me, self-care is talking with my mom, the end of the day, talking with my sister, talking with a friend. And again, the most important thing is really dancing it all out.
Well, thank you for those wise words, Amal, and I regret we did not program a DJ for this evening. Think about that for next time. This has been such an interesting evening, so thank you so much for coming to us and sharing your wisdom.